Hey everyone, Tim Schofield here. Today we are going to be talking about gaming laptops, specifically why you should look for an NVIDIA 30 series GPU in your next gaming laptop. In this video, we'll be doing a lot of gaming and testing as well. I do want to give a big thanks and shout out to NVIDIA for sponsoring this video and sending over this Razer laptop for us to use and test. For reference, while doing all my testing and gaming on this Razer Blade 17, it has an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3080 Ti laptop GPU, crazy amount of power in it, along with powering a 240 Hz 1440p display. These NVIDIA GeForce 30 series GPUs have a ton of features and technology packed into them, such as that Max-Q technology, ray tracing. However, the one I'd like to focus on in this video is called DLSS, Deep Learning Super Sampling. Now, DLSS has been extremely impressive. I had to test it for myself, so I chose multiple games that have DLSS. There's actually over 150 games that feature this DLSS technology, and I wanted to make sure the testing that I did was real world, so I had Chrome running in the background, I had Discord running in the background while I did my test with DLSS on and DLSS off. And while we're looking at a couple examples while gaming, you'll notice frames are a little bit different. One is with DLSS on, one is with DLSS off. However, you'll notice that the quality of the image looks very similar. So how is this possible? How is DLSS increasing these frames in these games? Now, the simple way to explain this is it takes the game and runs it at a lower resolution. So for example, instead of running a game at 4K, it'll run it at 1080p and then use AI, artificial intelligence, to upscale that image back to that standard resolution that you would run it at. Now, what this allows for is an increase in that performance, but then upscales it to a similar image quality, which will in turn raise that frames per second that you get. So not only do you get incredible performance from just the hardware in these GPUs alone, but using AI, NVIDIA can add even more to it. DLSS uses the power of NVIDIA's supercomputers to train and improve its AI model, and then tensor cores within the GPU contain that AI rendering tech. So you are utilizing those supercomputers within the NVIDIA GeForce 30 series laptop GPUs. So now that we know how DLSS works, let's take a look at some real world examples and comparisons with multiple games that have this DLSS tech built in. To begin, let's take a look at God of War, which has been a lot of fun. There's a ton of detail in the game, very high quality, and it does have DLSS built in with different settings. And within those settings, it really does show you the scaled resolution versus the output resolution, whether you use performance, quality, balanced DLSS. While testing all these games, I had graphics settings to ultra, so really high on all of the games, and I chose balanced on most of the games for DLSS settings. Since it's a single player game, it was very easy to replicate different scenes within the game. I would just play the same level over and over with and without DLSS on to get an average frames per second. Now, the results were very obvious while playing. I consistently noticed higher frames with DLSS on, and the results after averaging it out, so the average FPS with DLSS off was 68 frames per second, and then with it on and balanced, it was 79.5, so 80 frames per second, over 10 FPS higher with that DLSS on. Another game that can take advantage of DLSS is Fortnite, a game that I've played quite a bit, and this one had a substantial increase in the frames per second. Now, it is a battle royale, so it's a multiplayer game, so it was a little more of a challenge to test. So what I did was I went to the same location on the map over and over and over just to keep going to the same spot. And early game, I would just do a benchmarking test the same amount of time. I would get an average, and then I would just start all over again multiple times with and without DLSS on. So again, very real world testing because it's going to be different every single time when you play a multiplayer game, but I am very confident that I got a consistent average between the two. And the results pretty insane, 114.2 frames per second without DLSS and 179.7 with DLSS on. So a substantial jump while you are playing your games. You can really take advantage of the higher refresh rate displays that you have. Another game I tested was Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, which has a lot of high-end textures to render. So keep in mind, it's not just a static image it's rendering. You're moving, you're constantly panning left and right, and while moving, it's upscaling all of these higher-end textures. And the results using DLSS were, again, very impressive. With DLSS off, I got 44.1 frames per second, and then with it on, up to 62.4 frames per second. So I can eclipse that 60 frames per second. Again, this is an ultra high quality graphics setting. So I can even bump down those graphics settings and get even more frames per second on top of that when I turn DLSS on. And the last game I used to test out DLSS is Lego Builders Journey. You'll notice the frames per second in the bottom left here. I wanted to do just a live test. So first of all, going into graphics, want to point out that ray tracing is an option within this game, which is another NVIDIA technology which dramatically improves the quality and how good the game looks. Anyway, scaling, I have DLSS on right there, okay? So we are gonna go back with it on. I'm going to hit continue. And we are in a game here, and you'll notice bottom left here, I'm getting about 65 frames a second when moving around. Let's go ahead and, yeah, so about 65 frames per second, very consistent. Now, if I go back down to options to graphics and turn DLSS off. Now let's go back into the game and you'll see all the way down to 24 frames per second. That is just a crazy, 25 frames per second, just a crazy difference just by simply turning that technology on and off. So again, just highly recommend checking if you have an NVIDIA GeForce RTX GPU, if you can turn DLSS on to really bump up those frames. And it's noticeable right away. Look at that. Bumps it over all the way up to 66 frames per second again by turning it on. And it's just very, even just to the eyeball, you can tell it's much smoother. So to wrap everything up, through all of my testing and benchmarking, which was a lot of fun, I got to play games and just kind of calculate the average FPS. It was very clear that DLSS really does improve the performance and give you those higher frames. Again, especially with laptops coming out with higher refresh rates displays, you really do want to get the most frames per second out of your GPU. So that's why it's important to look for an NVIDIA 30 series laptop GPU in your next gaming laptop. You can take full advantage of NVIDIA's tech, that DLSS tech. You can get ray tracing and a lot more. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Be sure to subscribe as well. A lot more content coming soon. As always, thanks for watching.